How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be walking you through the HR 127 language. This was a bill which was pre-filed prior to Biden taking his office, taking his oath. And now we actually have the text and we actually get to see what I guess this new Congress is proposing for various gun control regulations and things like that. But real quick, before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main sponsors of the channel, that being Thorson Customs. Thorson Customs does a lot to support us here on this channel and also help to support us here in the state of California. They have California compliant parts and features that you can purchase from them when you're doing your AR-15 style rifle build. So if you're interested in taking a look at them, I'll put a link to them down in the detail section. And I also want to thank Tacpak. Tacpak has a subscription-based box that you can purchase from them, and you get it on a month-to-month basis, and it has a lot of gun gear, firearms, goodies in it. It has a lot of things that you probably wouldn't purchase for yourself, but things you didn't even know you wanted, and you get them, and I'm always excited about it, especially when I get things like knives, shirts, various things for my rifle build. So it's just a really cool box, and if you've been interested in taking a look at Tacpak, I'll also put a link to them down in the detail section. So HR 127, also known as the Sikh Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. So I'm just kind of walk through this through the point for point, some of the main things that I pulled out from this and some of the main talking points that are in relation to this bill and what it's proposing. So the first one is the Firearms Registration System. So it kind of sounds like what it is. It is going to be a firearms register. It is going to be a federal registration of firearms, not just of firearms that are purchased after this bill is put into effect, but also any firearm that is owned or purchased prior to the actual enactment of this bill. And I'll just be referring to some of my notes here because, again, this thing is pretty thick. It's very convoluted. It has a lot of moving parts. But essentially, when it comes to the firearms register system, what it is asking is that owners of firearms shall transmit to the ATF the make, model, serial number of all firearms, identify who the owner of it is, and the date that it was acquired by that owner. So all of that information is going to be requested to be sent, or not even requested, demanded to be sent to the ATF. And essentially, once the bill takes effect, everybody will have 3 months to send all that information to the ATF. So you will have to let the ATF know of all the firearms you have, when you purchase them, what the make and model of them are, when you got them, or even there's some requirements that if you're going to loan it to people, you have to let the ATF know that as well. And also, anytime going forward that you purchase a firearm, you're going to have to let the ATF know that information as well. One of the really scary things about this federal register is not just that the ATF will know and the federal government will know all of those things that you have prior and going forward, but also they're going to make this federal register open to public as well. So right out the get-go, you can see that this bill is going to be very aggressive in infringing on our Second Amendment rights. Right in the very beginning of this bill, they're going to require a federal register of all firearms, and they want to know the make, model, who owns it, and then they're going to make that accessible to everybody. So pretty much invading your privacy as well as invading your Second Amendment rights. And so the very next thing that is introduced in this bill is the firearms and ammunition licensing scheme. So this is one of those things that we kind of gathered from the header, that they were going to require some sort of federal licensing for people to possess firearms as well as ammunition. And that is exactly what they're doing. They are demanding that people have a federal license and various licenses, which is actually interesting. So we'll talk about this, different kinds of licenses for different types of firearms if you want to possess them. So the first one that is in this section is the general license. So this is just kind of a general license for if you want to purchase firearms and ammunition. And we're going to talk about why this is the general versus there's some other ones. There's going to be an antique firearms license, which I'm not going to get heavy into here because I don't think it applies to a lot of people, but it is still very significant. And then they have a military style weapon license as well. So the first one, the general license, what is this going to require? So first, the individual has to be 21 years of age to have this general license. You'll have to undergo a federal background check as well for this federal general license. And then on top of that, you are going to have to undergo a psychological evaluation. So they are going to require psych evals for you to have a general license to then exercise your Second Amendment rights and actually possess and have firearms in the US. And the psych eval is even more invasive than what you would even think it would be. First, the bill says that when it comes to the psych evaluation, the AG's office is going to get to determine those standards for an appropriate psych evaluation. And then they say that it has to be performed by an AG approved psychologists. So it can't even just be anybody. There are going to be these AG approved psychologists who are going to be performing these psych evaluations. And then on top of all that, they will also be interviewing your spouse, significant other, and 2 other individuals either in your family or that you're associated with in some way to determine whether or not you are mentally fit to actually have this license and get to possess firearms. So like I said, you can see that this psych evaluation is very invasive and goes well beyond violating our Second Amendment rights. And then if you get past the background check, the psych evaluation, then they're also going to institute a training requirement as well for you to get this general license. And the training course is going to be 24 hours worth of training time for this general license. And then if that wasn't enough, on top of all of that as well, they're going to require that you go to the AG's office and get this weird type of liability insurance through the AG's office. Now, I was a little bit confused when I was reading through this, but what it amounts to is you're going to have to pay, I think it's $800 for you to have a 1-year liability insurance through the AG's office. And then if you meet all of these requirements, then you get to have your general license to possess firearms and ammunition. But then what if you want to have a military style weapon, or military style rifle is kind of what they're calling? They are going to require that you have an additional license on top of that general license to actually possess these types of firearms. So the first requirement on top of all of that is that you have to have your general license. Like I said, you're going to have to go through all those steps and achieve and actually obtain that general license. And then you're going to have to do an additional 24-hour training requirement specifically to these military style weapons for you to get this military style license with the federal government so that you can possess these types of firearms. Now, we're going to be covering here in a little bit what they are defining to be these military style weapons, because they include a specific definition for what those type of firearms are. And I'm sure you can guess what they are. Pretty much they're talking about AR-15 style rifles, things like that. So I thought it was also important to kind of look at what are the expiration requirements in this and the renewal requirements for these various licenses as well. Now, this was a really confusing section when you're going through this because they were referring back to different sections that came prior, and it was kind of a little bit of weird of web to try to unravel all this to see actually what they were talking about. So first, let's talk about the expiration of these various licenses. So it's going to come down to this weird requirement where if you've had your license less than 5 years, then the license expires every year. If you happen to get through all this process, maintain your license, have it for over 5 years, then it will expire after 3 years from your most recent renewal. So it's kind of this weird tiered system to where if you're new to it, you have a new license, it expires every year after the initial issuance of that license or after the 1 year after the renewal of that initial license. And if you're lucky enough to maintain it for the 5 years, then it renews 3 years or expires pretty much every 3 years after that. So what are the renewal requirements? Because like we said, there are clear expiration dates that are going to be put on these various licenses. Well, there's renewals as well. And what it is after 60 days after the expiration date, you have to renew that license. And the way you renew them is going to depend on the type of license you have. So like I said, you can have that general license, there's an antique license as well, and then that military style weapon license as well. If you're renewing the general within a 3-year period prior to that renewal, what it appears you have to do is, again, you have to have a psych evaluation, you have to pass that, and then you also have to do an additional 8-hour training to renew that license. On top of that, you also have to, I guess, renew that insurance liability because like we said, it's good for 1 year, so you're going to have to renew it. And so I'm assuming you're going to have to pay an additional $800 for that liability insurance for that new 1 year, and you're going to have to maintain that so that you can then renew that general license. Now, when it comes to the military style weapon license, there are different requirements for that as well. First, you're going to have renewed that general license as well. Like I said, that general license is a prerequisite to having this military style weapon license. And then 2 years prior to the renewal of that military style weapon license, you're going to have to do an additional 8-hour training course specifically to those types of weapons. And it's an AG approved training course. All right, so now we got through the federal registration requirement that's in this bill. We got through the various licensing schemes, renewals, expirations, all that nonsense that's in this bill. Now let's actually talk about what they're going to define as military style weapons, because it's important for the type of licensing and all that stuff that's in this bill. So first, what they do in defining what these military style weapons are is they actually attack a specific category of make and model of firearms. And essentially what they say is any makes and models or duplicates of these various things like the Beretta, the Colt AR-15, the AUG, things like that, revolving cylinder shotguns, things like that. If they are those types of firearms, they're going to be considered as military style weapons. Now they go beyond just targeting specific makes and models, and then they go after various, configurations of style of rifles and firearms as well. Also, a military style weapon can be a semi-automatic rifle, which is important because they don't say semi-automatic centerfire rifle. They say a semi-automatic rifle, which means any semi-automatic rifle that has the ability to accept a detachable magazine. So again, has a detachable magazine and has at least two of the following: a folding or telescoping stock, a pistol grip that protrudes conspicuously beneath the action of the weapon, a bayonet mount, a flash suppressor, or a threaded barrel designed to accommodate a flash suppressor, or a grenade launcher. So again, this rings very a la state of California. Beyond that, they talk about semi-automatic pistols, and they say that, again, if they have the ability to accept detachable magazines and two of the offending features, an ammunition magazine that is attached outside of the pistol grip. So again, if the magazine doesn't go into the actual pistol grip, but goes into something else, that is one of the features. If it has a threaded barrel, a flash suppressor, a forward hand grip, a silencer, or a shroud that covers the barrel. If its manufactured weight is over 50 ounces or more, again, that's a feature. Or if it's a semi-automatic version of an automatic firearm. So again, if it has any combination of those, any two combinations of those, and it's a semi-automatic pistol with a detachable magazine, then it is going to be considered to be a military style weapon, and you're going to have this license to be in possession of it. They then also go after shotguns, and they again say it's going to be a semi-automatic shotgun with any two offending features: a folding or collapsible stock, a pistol grip that protrudes conspicuously beneath the action of the weapon. That is almost word for word what California has when they talk about pistol grips. A fixed magazine with the capacity in excess of 5 rounds, or it has the ability to accept a detachable magazine. So any combination of those is going to make it a military style weapon, and you're going to have a license to be in lawful possession of it. So that's what they're defining as military style weapons. Now, what they also do in this bill is some very tricky things as well, and actually didn't think that they were going to throw this specifically in this bill, but they did. We saw in the title when we first saw this pre-filed is that they were going to be prohibiting specific ammunition. Well, when you go to the section that talks about prohibiting certain ammunition, there's also a section on magazines as well. So first, when they talk about prohibiting specific ammunition, what they're talking about is any caliber 50 or above. That is then going to be a prohibited style ammunition, and you cannot possess it in the US is essentially what they're going to say. And then they're attaching fines to this as well. And the penalty can be from $50,000 to $100,000 and up to 10 to 20 years in prison. And then they also throw in this new definition and prohibition on magazines. Specifically, the buzzword, of course, which they throw in here and then try to define, are large capacity magazines, similar to what we saw here in the state of California. Now they're trying to introduce it at a federal level. And actually what they say under this, and this is section 3, it's that header prohibited on possession of certain ammunition. This isn't even ammunition, they're talking about magazines, but they say it shall be unlawful for any person to possess a large capacity ammunition feeding device. Now, what do they define as these large capacity ammunition feeding devices? Well, they say the term large capacity ammunition feeding device means a magazine, belt, drum, feed strip, or similar device that has a capacity of or that can be readily restored or converted to accept more than 10 rounds of ammunition, but does not include an attached tubular device designed to accept and is capable of operating only with 22 caliber rimfire ammunition. And again, they threw in very hefty penalties for this. And I just took down a quick note about the penalties that they're going to try to have for this. And it's a penalty of from $10,000 to $25,000 and up from 1 year to 5 year imprisonment if you're in possession of one of these magazines. So again, very aggressive in this language. As you can see, HR 127 has a whole slew of horrible things in it, from a federal register to federal licensing on various things for you to possess firearms. And then also they're throwing in prohibitions on certain types of ammunition, 50 caliber and above. And then they are also trying to prohibit the possession of magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. So HR 127 is just a horrible bill. It has some really bad gun control in it. And if something like this gets passed, we are in for a rough time here in the US. Take it from us here in the state of California. We already live under some of these things, but not even some of these things this bad. A lot of this stuff is going to be even worse than what we have here in the state of California. So for a lot of you who look at California and you say, I would never live there, what they're trying to do is bring even worse things at a federal level. So I highly recommend you guys reach out to your local representatives, your representatives in Congress. Let them know that you do not agree with this bill, HR 127. Let them know that you do not agree with this type of gun control and you will not support them if they support actions like this. So if you guys like this video and like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to hit that notification bell because that helps the channel analytics, helps to spread the word about the Second Amendment, and also spread the word about things like this that are going on in the US, which infringe on our Second Amendment rights. So as always, thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars. This nation will be maintained by armed scholars.